She thought her life ended when her captors branded her and left her to die. But fate led her to a lonely rancher, a woman who had lost everything, yet still believed in healing. Together, on the wild frontier, they rebuilt their shattered souls, proving that scars can fade when kindness meets courage beneath the endless western sky. Let's get started. The rain stopped before dawn, leaving the prairie wrapped in mist. Inside the small cabin, the fire still burned low, throwing flickering shadows across rough wooden walls. The rancher sat beside the bed, his eyes fixed on the young woman lying there. She couldn't have been more than 25, her face pale, her lips trembling even in sleep. The storm had left her soaked and bruised. But what worried him more was the hollowness behind her expression. The look of someone who had lost far more than blood or warmth. He rose quietly, fetched a clean rag from a drawer, and soaked it in warm water. When he returned to her side, she stirred slightly, her breath catching. "Easy now," he murmured, wringing out the cloth and dabbing gently at the dirt on her forehead. She winced but didn't pull away. Her eyes fluttered open, searching his face as if trying to decide whether to trust him. He was older, maybe 35, with the steady calm of a man used to solitude. She saw no cruelty there, only quiet concern. When she tried to sit up, pain twisted across her features. He placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You're hurt," he said softly. "Rest first. Talk later." She nodded weakly, her eyes filling again with tears. "You shouldn't help me," she whispered. "I bring trouble." He met her gaze without hesitation. "Trouble finds everyone out here," he said simply. "But that doesn't mean a person's left to die." His tone was firm but kind, a voice that somehow reached the part of her heart that still believed in decency. Hours passed in silence. The wind outside carried the scent of wet sage and distant cattle. The woman drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by memories she refused to face. Each time she awoke, the rancher was nearby, tending the fire, checking her bandages, offering water when she could swallow. She watched him quietly, noticing the patience in his every movement. It had been a long time since anyone had shown her care without expecting something in return. That alone frightened her more than the pain. By the second evening, she found her voice again. "You don't even know my name," she murmured. He looked up from the fire. "You'll tell me when you're ready," he replied. After a pause, she whispered, "Clara." He nodded. "Elias," he said in return, giving his name as easily as he would offer a handshake. The simplicity of it eased something inside her. Where am I?" she asked. "South ridge of Dry Creek," he said. "My ranch is the last before the canyon. You're safe here." When she heard the word safe, Clara's expression broke. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she turned her face toward the wall. Elias didn't ask what had happened. He only handed her a cup of water and waited until her breathing steadied. He knew that healing in the West took more than medicine. It took patience, quiet, and the will to keep a person's dignity intact. So he gave her all three, day after day. Without ever demanding answers, she wasn't ready to give. As the days passed, Clara grew stronger. The color returned to her cheeks, and she could move around the cabin on her own. Still, fear lingered behind her eyes. Sometimes, when the wind howled outside, she would startle and clutch her shawl tightly. Elias noticed, but never pressed her. Instead, he filled the silence with stories of ranch life. The stubborn mule that wouldn't cross a stream. The calf that thought it was a dog. His quiet humor coaxed small smiles from her, hesitant but real. One afternoon, while he repaired a saddle on the porch, Clara joined him, leaning on the doorframe. "You saved my life," she said quietly. Elias didn't look up from his work, just did what anyone decent would. She shook her head. Not everyone would have stopped. Her voice trembled, and he finally glanced up, meeting her eyes. "You think I'd leave a soul out there to die?" he asked. "You don't strike me as someone the world's been kind to," she admitted. "Why help me?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe kindness is the only way I know to fight back." That night, Clara found herself unable to sleep. The nightmares came again. Dark figures, running, shouting, the sound of gunfire. She woke with a cry, and before she knew it, Elias was at her side, lantern in hand. "It's just a dream," he said softly. She shook her head, trembling. "It wasn't a dream. They'll come for me." His brow furrowed. "Who?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Men from the border. I saw them rob us. They branded me so I wouldn't tell." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hands to her face. Ilias's jaw tightened as he listened. He didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, he said quietly, "Then they'll have to get through me first." She looked up in disbelief. "You don't even know me," she said. "Don't need to," he answered. "Wrong is wrong." His words carried the weight of conviction. Simple but fierce. That night, he loaded his rifle and kept it near the door. The wind outside had changed direction, carrying a chill that told him danger wasn't far. Days turned into a fragile routine. Clara helped around the cabin, cooking simple meals, tending to the small garden behind the barn. Her limp was slight now, but she still moved carefully, wary of pushing herself too far. Sometimes, Elias would catch her staring toward the horizon, her expression distant. She confessed once, "I used to think the world ended where my village did. Now I know it's bigger and crueler." He looked at her and said softly, "Cruel, maybe, but it's still got room for good folks." Asterisk when the outlaws finally rode into view, one dusty afternoon, Elias was ready. Clara froze at the window, recognizing the men who had branded her. Fear rose like bile in her throat, but Elias placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Stay inside," he said calmly. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, his stance firm. The men sneered when they saw him. "We're just looking for someone," their leader said. Ilias's voice was low but steady. "Ain't no one here wants your kind of company." Asterisk the standoff stretched under the blazing sun. Then, with a warning glare, the riders turned their horses and retreated, unwilling to test the rancher's resolve. When Elias came back inside, Clara was crying, not from fear, but relief. He set his rifle aside and knelt beside her. "It's over," he said. She looked at him, her voice shaking. "You could have been killed." He smiled faintly. "I've faced worse odds for less reason." Asterisk that evening, they sat on the porch together, watching the last light fade over the plains. The world felt quiet again, washed clean by both storm and courage. Clara leaned against the railing, breathing in the scent of sage and dust. "I thought I'd never feel safe again," she whispered. Elias looked out at the horizon. "Safety's not always about walls," he said. "Sometimes it's about who stands beside you." She turned to him, her eyes soft with gratitude that words could never express. Asterisk the days that followed were gentler. The nightmares came less often, replaced by laughter and quiet work. Clara began writing letters she never sent to the family she'd lost, to the girl she used to be, to the future she was finally beginning to believe in. Elias never read them, but he always left paper and ink by her bedside. He understood that healing wasn't something he could do for her. It was something she had to reclaim herself, step by step, day by day. Asterisk by the time spring came, the prairie had bloomed again. The land that once drowned in rain now shimmered with life. Clara stood outside one morning, sunlight warming her face. The scar on her shoulder was still there, but it no longer defined her. She turned to see Elias leading his horse from the barn, tipping his hat as he passed. In that simple gesture, she saw everything he had given her: safety, dignity, and the quiet proof that goodness still existed in a hard world. Asterisk the next few days moved like the slow turn of a wagon wheel, quiet, steady, and full of weight. Clara slept in short bursts, haunted by memories that came without warning. Sometimes she woke, gasping, pressing her hand against the scar on her shoulder as if trying to erase it. Elias, the rancher, never asked about it again. He only made sure the fire stayed warm, the water stayed clean, and her strength returned little by little. Every act of care was a silent promise that she wasn't alone anymore. Asterisk when she was strong enough to walk, she began helping around the cabin. She swept the floors, fetched water from the well, and cooked simple meals that reminded her of home, before her life had been stolen by cruelty. Elias watched from a distance, pretending to focus on ranch work, but truthfully, he admired her quiet determination. She moved like a soul, learning to live again, fragile yet fierce, rebuilding herself in the stillness of that small wooden home. Asterisk one morning, Clara stepped outside and felt the wind brush through her hair. The scent of rain and sage filled the air. She tilted her face toward the sun, feeling warmth instead of fear for the first time in months. Elias approached, carrying a bucket of feed for the horses. "You're healing fast," he said with a faint smile. She nodded. "I'm trying to." Then, softly, she added, "You should have left me there, you know." Elias set down the bucket and looked at her. "You're wrong," he said. "The world needs people who keep trying." Asterisk that night, the prairie was calm. Clara sat near the fireplace, sewing the torn edges of her dress. Elias read from an old book of poems his mother had once loved. His voice was deep, patient, the kind that wrapped around the silence like a blanket. When he finished reading, Clara spoke in a whisper. "Do you think scars ever fade?" He glanced at her shoulder, then back to her eyes. "Some fade, some stay, but they stop hurting once you decide they're part of your story, not the end of it." Asterisk her eyes softened. "You talk like someone who's seen his share of hurt," she said. Elias looked into the flames for a long time before replying. "I buried my wife 3 winters ago," he said quietly. "Fever took her quick. After that, I figured maybe I was done feeling anything at all. Then I found you." The words hung in the air, heavy with honesty. Clara didn't speak, but the understanding between them deepened. Two broken souls recognizing the same kind of loss in each other. Asterisk days turned into weeks, and the ranch began to hum with quiet life again. Calves were born, fences mended, and spring painted the land in shades of green. Clara found small joys in the rhythm of each day. The creak of the porch, the smell of coffee in the morning, the distant sound of cattle bells. She still bore the mark on her shoulder, but inside, something stronger was growing, a will to reclaim her dignity. Elias saw it too, though he never said it out loud. Asterisk one afternoon, while gathering firewood near the creek, Clara noticed hoofprints, fresh, deep, and leading toward the ridge. Panic clawed at her chest. She hurried back to the cabin. Elias saw her pale face and instantly understood. "They're back," he asked. She nodded. Without another word, he took his rifle from the wall and stepped outside. "You stay here," he ordered. But Clara caught his sleeve. "Don't fight them," she pleaded. "They'll kill you." Elias looked down at her trembling hand and said, "Some things are worth the risk." Hours passed before he returned. The sun was setting, casting the sky in gold and red. When Elias rode up the path, his shirt was torn, but his eyes were steady. "They won't bother us again," he said simply. Clara ran to him, her heart pounding. "What did you do?" she asked breathlessly. "I made them understand this land ain't theirs to poison," he replied. She could see the strain in his face, the exhaustion, the fire of quiet defiance that defined men like him, those who stood between cruelty and what was right. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She stepped outside, the cool wind brushing against her hair. Elias sat on the porch, cleaning his rifle, the glow of the lantern casting soft light on his face. "You shouldn't have risked yourself for me," she said softly. He didn't look up. "You're not a risk," he said. "You're a reason." Her breath caught. No one had ever said anything like that to her. For a moment, the silence between them said everything. Gratitude, sorrow, and something too gentle to name. Days grew warmer as summer spread across the plains. Clara worked beside Elias in the fields, learning how to mend fences and drive cattle. Her laughter, something once forgotten, began to return in small bursts. Elias found himself smiling more often too, though he never said why. Sometimes, at dusk, they sat outside watching the sunset, the colors painting the land like fire. "I used to think life ended the day they branded me," Clara said one evening. "But maybe it was the day I was reborn." Elias nodded slowly. "Reborn stronger," he said. As weeks turned to months, the ranch no longer felt like a place of refuge. It felt like home. The brand on Clara's shoulder remained, but its meaning changed. It was no longer a symbol of what had been taken. It became a reminder of what she'd survived. She began keeping a journal, writing about each sunrise, each small victory. Elias never read it, but he often saw her smiling afterward, as though she was finally writing her way back into her own life. When autumn came, a cold wind swept across the plains. One evening, as they prepared for the long winter ahead, Clara looked up from stacking wood and said softly, "I'll never be able to repay what you've done." Elias shook his head. "You already have," he said. "You lived." She blinked back tears. "You gave me back my name," she whispered. "You gave me back my strength." He looked at her, eyes kind and steady. "You did that yourself. I just reminded you it was still there." That night, Clara placed her hand over the scar on her shoulder and felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. The pain that once burned there had turned to quiet memory. She knew she would never forget what happened, but she also knew it no longer defined her. In the stillness of the cabin, she whispered a prayer for the woman she used to be, and a thank you for the man who helped her find her way back. The next morning, she rode out with Elias across the open fields. The sky stretched endlessly, painted in the soft colors of dawn. Wind brushed her face, carrying the scent of freedom. Elias glanced at her and smiled. "You ride like you've been doing it your whole life," he said. Clara laughed softly. "Maybe I'm finally learning." He nodded toward the horizon. "Then keep going. Don't ever stop." As they rode toward the rising sun, the ranch behind them glowed in golden light, a small place of peace in a wild world. Clara knew the road ahead would hold new storms, but she also knew she'd never face them alone again. The woman who once whispered, "I'm not clean anymore," was gone. In her place rode someone stronger, a survivor, a free soul, reborn under the vast, forgiving sky of the West.